Imagine the absolute silence of a summer night in the 52nd year before our era. Only the whisper of wind in the oak crowns and the distant neighing of horses disturb the peace of Gallic land. And suddenly, the thunder of thousands of sandals against the stones of an ancient road. Dust rises in a column into the starry sky. These are Caesar's legions marching, 74 kilometers in one day, 50 Roman miles with all equipment, with weapons weighing 20 kilograms per soldier. The army stopped for only 3 hours of sleep, and back on the road before dawn. The legion called their commander Lightning of War, and now it's clear why. Could modern soldiers repeat this feat? The marathon distance is 42 kilometers, and even a trained runner covers it in 3 to 4 hours. The Romans nearly doubled this distance while carrying full combat gear. But what compelled the renowned commander Gaius Julius Caesar to raise 4 legions in the middle of the night and throw them into this inhuman march? Why did even the hardened veterans of the Gallic Wars call this campaign legendary? The swiftness of Caesar's army movements amazed even his contemporaries. Caesar's speed, celeritas Caesariana, became a household term among Roman military commanders. In the 57th year before our era, he crossed all of Gaul, 500 kilometers in 15 days. And during the civil war with Pompey, covered 450 kilometers from Corfinium to Brundisium, also in 15 days. But the June march of the 52nd year surpassed all previous records. This was a demonstration of what the Roman military machine was capable of when controlled by a genius. 4 legions set out at a speed that seemed impossible even for individual horsemen. The story of this march began with betrayal that could have cost Rome all of Gaul and Caesar life and glory. May of the 52nd year before our era. Gaul burns in the fire of rebellion. Vercingetorix, the young chief of the Arverni, managed what seemed impossible, to unite under his banners all Gallic tribes from the Atlantic to the Rhine. 80,000 foot warriors and 15,000 horsemen, Gaul had not seen such an army since the invasion of the Cimbri. Caesar understood. His empire hung by a thread. 10 legions, scattered across conquered lands, suddenly found themselves surrounded. Communication between detachments was severed, fortresses captured, and Roman garrisons slaughtered to the last man. The commander, accustomed to dictating terms, found himself on the defensive for the first time in 8 years of Gallic wars. Imagine the map of Gaul in the spring of the 52nd year. Red dots of Roman camps drowning in a sea of rebellious tribes. And somewhere in this chaos moves a small group of horsemen. Caesar himself, rushing from Rome to his troops through hostile territory. Every mile of the journey, mortal risk. Every night's rest could be the last. But the real catastrophe awaited the Romans under the walls of Gergovia, the sacred city of the Arverni, built on an impregnable rock. Here, for the first time in his entire career, the great Caesar suffered defeat. 700 Roman soldiers fell under Gallic swords, and the commander himself barely escaped capture. Can you imagine what a man who had never known the taste of defeat felt? Legionnaires, veterans of dozens of battles, saw their comrades flee from the battlefield. The Aquila, the sacred eagle of the legion, nearly fell into barbarian hands. This was the moment when the fate of the empire balanced on the edge of a sword. It was then that Vercingetorix made the strategic mistake that cost him the war and his freedom. Instead of pursuing the retreating Romans, he decided to apply scorched earth tactics. The Gallic commander ordered the destruction of all food supplies, to burn cities and villages, turning his native land into a desert. This strategy had its name, scorched earth, which meant turning fertile lands into lifeless wasteland. Vercingetorix calculated to starve the Roman army and force it to retreat to the borders of the old provinces. The plan was brilliant in theory, but it didn't account for one thing: the genius of his opponent. June of the 52nd year. Caesar stands on a hill by the Saône River and looks at the map of Gaul spread before him on a field table. 4 legions, 24,000 select warriors, his only hope against Vercingetorix's 80,000 strong army. But the great commander already sees the plan that will turn the tide of war. A Roman legion is not just a military unit, but a perfect machine for war and creation. 6,000 men divided into 10 cohorts of 600 fighters each. In each cohort, 6 centuries of 100 warriors, and at the head of each century stands a centurion, a professional officer with a vine staff in hand as a symbol of authority. Imagine a legion column on the march. It's a river of steel and leather stretched over 3 kilometers. In front march the hastati, young warriors in chainmail. Behind them the principes, experienced fighters in their prime. Closing the column are the triarii, grey-bearded veterans with hasta spears. Each soldier carries 20 kilograms of equipment, a gladius sword, scutum shield, 2 pilum javelins, helmet, armor and marching gear. Can you imagine the sound of this march? Thousands of iron-shod sandals striking the roadstones in unified rhythm, armor clanking, leather creaking. This is the music of Roman greatness, and it strikes terror into all who hear it. But in that terrible June of the 52nd year, this formidable machine found itself on the brink of destruction. Vercingetorix set a trap at the Loire crossing, the only path to the elite Aedui tribes. Gallic cavalry, the best in the world, controlled all fords and bridges. Every attempt to force the river turned into bloody slaughter. It was then that Caesar made a decision that seemed like madness even to his closest assistants. The commander gathered a war council and announced, "Tomorrow at dawn, the army sets out on a forced march to Aedui lands. The journey will take not 3 days as usual, but 1 day. 74 kilometers along mountain paths under blazing sun without rest stops." The legates, highest officers of the legions, exchanged worried glances. Even the most hardened veterans had never made such marches. But Caesar already saw the entire plan. While Vercingetorix waits for the Romans at the Loire crossings, the legions will bypass the Gallic army and strike where they are not expected. Every hour of delay could cost Rome Gaul, and Caesar himself, life and glory. On the evening of June 27th, 52nd year before our era, the sound of bucinae, bronze horns that summoned legionaries to formation, rang out at the Roman camp on the Allies bank. But this was no ordinary signal. 4 long, drawn-out sounds meant emergency assembly of the entire army. In the twilight, armor gleamed, weapons rang. 24,000 warriors prepared for a march the like of which history had never known. Imagine this moment. Experienced centurions check each soldier's equipment, for the condition of sandals could determine the empire's fate. Each legionnaire receives 3 days of dry rations, hard biscuits, salted meat, sour wine diluted with water. This was called bucellatum, campaign food capable of sustaining a warrior's strength even in the harshest conditions. Can you imagine what it's like to carry 20 kilograms on your shoulders at a temperature of 30 degrees in the shade? Each legionnaire is a human mule, as the Gauls themselves called them. Chainmail weighing 9 kilograms, a shield of oak boards, another 7, sword, helmet, 2 javelins, shovel, axe, pot, cloak. And all this must be carried 74 kilometers along mountain paths in 1 day. But most amazing, morally, these men were ready for any sacrifice for their commander. Over 8 years of Gallic wars, Caesar transformed ordinary citizens into an invincible machine. His soldiers marched with him from the Rhine to the Atlantic, from Britain to Helvetia. They saw their general fight in the front ranks, share all the hardships of campaign life, knew every centurion by name. Midnight. Caesar gives the signal to advance. The column stretches 5 kilometers along the narrow mountain road. In front march the cavalry, Germanic horsemen on tall horses, their task to guard the flanks and conduct reconnaissance. Behind them, the vanguard of select cohorts, then the main forces of 4 legions. Closing the column is the baggage train with wounded and supplies. The sound of this night march is impossible to forget. Thousands of sandals strike stones in unified rhythm. Armor clanks, leather straps creak. This is the pulse of the Roman military machine, the rhythm to which peoples were conquered. Every 2 hours, a 10-minute rest, a gulp of water from a wineskin, a piece of bread. But what did these men feel when dawn found them in the heart of hostile territory? Every hill could hide Gallic archers, every forest a cavalry ambush. And yet the column moves forward with iron discipline that became the symbol of Roman greatness. Dawn of June 28. The sun rises over the hills of Gaul, and its first rays illuminate an incredible sight. A column of Roman legions emerges from a mountain gorge straight into the heart of Aedui lands. 74 kilometers covered, 24,000 warriors accomplished what seemed physically impossible. Imagine the condition of these men. Feet covered in bloody blisters, armor soaked with sweat, but fire of victory burns in their eyes. They know their commander has deceived the enemy again, has appeared where he wasn't expected. The Aedui, faithful allies of Rome, meet the legions with bread and wine. But the joy will be short-lived. Ahead lies the decisive clash with Vercingetorix. This march forever changed the principles of military art. Roman tactics of rapid movements received the name Martius Rapidus, swift march, allowing strikes where the opponent considers himself safe. Caesar proved speed can be the deciding factor even against superior enemy forces. Do you understand what psychological impact this had on the Gauls? Just yesterday, Vercingetorix controlled the lower crossings, was confident in his advantage. And today, Roman eagles flutter in Aedui lands, 100 kilometers from where they were expected. This was a blow not only to Gallic strategy, but to the barbarians' faith in their leaders' invincibility. The consequences of this march manifested within weeks. Vercingetorix, having lost strategic initiative, was forced to retreat to the fortress of Alesia. There, on an impregnable rock, the final act of the Gallic tragedy unfolded. A siege that decided Gaul's fate for 5 centuries ahead. Caesar himself wrote of this march as the campaign's turning point. Historians still debate, could any other ancient commander have repeated such a feat? But facts speak for themselves. 3 months after this legendary crossing, Vercingetorix laid down his weapons at the Roman commander's feet. Iron discipline, steel will, and command genius transformed ordinary men into a legend that will live for millennia. September of the 52nd year before our era. On the slopes of Alesia unfolds the final drama of Gallic freedom. Vercingetorix, driven into the fortress by Caesar's swift marches, looks at the double ring of Roman fortifications, circumvallation and contravallation. These earthen ramparts, stretching 18 kilometers, turned the impregnable fortress into a giant trap. Imagine the scale of this siege. 70,000 Gauls locked in the fortress, while outside approaches a 250,000 strong liberation army. Between them, 10 Roman legions, which in less than a month built a double system of fortifications with towers, ditches and obstacles. This engineering marvel had no equal in antiquity. Do you understand the scale of the catastrophe that unfolded here? In several days of battle under Alesia's walls, more Gauls perished than in all the previous 8 years of war. The flower of Gallic nobility fell under Roman swords, and Vercingetorix himself, to save the remnants of his people, appeared in the Roman camp and laid down his weapons at Caesar's feet. This gesture ended not only the rebellion, but Gaul's independence for 500 years ahead. Europe's richest country became a Roman province, its gold flowed into the Republic's treasury, and its warriors filled the legion's ranks. 1 million Gauls were sold into slavery, another million died in battles. Such was this war's toll. But the legendary 74-kilometer march changed not only Gaul's fate, it revolutionized military art. The principle of Martius Rapidus entered the regulations of all European armies. From Alexander Suvorov's campaigns to World War II's Blitzkrieg, everywhere echoes of Caesar's tactics are visible. Archaeologists still find traces of this march, worn Roman Caligae sandals, fragments of military equipment, coins depicting Gallic captives. French museums preserve iron pilum heads, javelins that legionnaires carried during their inhuman crossing. Modern military forces still study this march as a model of strategic mobility. The principles Caesar established became the foundation of rapid response doctrines, from airborne troops to special forces. 74 kilometers in one day. This is more than a military operation. This is a symbol of human will, capable of overcoming any obstacles for a great goal. History remembers many commanders, but only a few managed to turn the impossible into the inevitable. 2000 years later, Archaeologists find in Burgundy's soil worn soles of Roman Caligae sandals, fragments of iron buckles, shards of clay amphorae. Each find is a silent witness to that legendary march that forever changed Europe's face. 74 kilometers in one day became a symbol of Roman greatness, a standard of what human will subordinated to brilliant mind is capable of. Imagine a map of modern France. From Lyon to Dijon stretches a highway along which thousands of cars race. But 2000 years ago, through this same lands passed a column of legionnaires who accomplished a feat unequaled in military history. Their swift march decided the fate not only of Gaul, but of all Western Europe for centuries ahead. Do you understand the scale of what happened as a result of this crossing? 500,000 square kilometers, the territory of modern France, forever became part of the Roman Empire. 1 million Gauls were sold into slavery, another million died in battles. So much gold was brought to Rome that its price fell 25% relative to silver. This march made Caesar the richest man of his time and gave him an army loyal to the last drop of blood. 7 years after Alesia, these same legionnaires would cross the Rubicon and turn the Republic into an empire. The history of Rome, and therefore of all Western civilization, was rewritten in one day of inhuman marching. Military academies around the world still study the principles of celeritas Caesariana, Caesar's swiftness. From Napoleon's campaigns to modern special forces operations, everywhere echoes of that tactic are visible, which the Roman commander demonstrated in Gallic forests. Speed of maneuver, surprise of attack, iron discipline, these principles became the foundation of military art for millennia ahead. Modern marathoners run 42 kilometers in 2 to 3 hours, but imagining an army of 24,000 men covering nearly double the distance with full equipment seems impossible. And yet, it happened. On that hot June night of the 52nd year before our era, when history made a sharp turn to the sound of thousands of Roman sandals. 74 kilometers in one day. This is more than a military operation. This is proof that nothing is impossible for people united by a great idea and led by genius.